The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
Florida's governor signs into law new restrictions on public sector unions. Meanwhile, a big win for researchers at Yale who voted to join Unite Here. And today on the show, the New York City building trades and the launch of their peer support network. Welcome to the Thursday, May 7th edition of America's Workforce, where we are available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Well, today is Thursday, and it's Trades Day every Tuesday and Thursday here on America's Workforce. We focus on a specific trade. Today, it's the New York City building trades. And joining us is the head of the New York City building trades, also the state building trades, and that would be Gary LaBarbera, who has served since 2009 as president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. And then 5 years ago, he was elected president of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. Statewide, he represents 200,000 tradespeople, 12 district councils, state associations, 135 local unions. We'll talk about construction in New York City and in the state of New York. But what we're really going to get into, and I got to salute Gary and his team over there, we're going to talk about the recent launch of their peer support network. This is an initiative designed to reduce suicide rates and mitigate what's called the adverse impacts of stress among workers in the city's unionized construction industry. Now, we've been doing a whole lot of shows on this podcast dealing with mental illness and suicide in the construction industry. Construction workers are 6 times more likely to die from suicide than a job site-related injury, and 4 times more likely to commit suicide than the average American, resulting from a combination of several factors, including the danger and stress involved with the work, the instability and the availability of work and pay. You know, you're on again, you're off again. You know, there's not an even flow of income coming in. That causes a lot of stress. Well, the peer support network, Gary is going to just tell us all the details. This is really good stuff, what they put together. They put a lot of thought into this, and they have a lot of buy-in from management, from the contractors, because they want workers that are healthy. They don't want workers to take their own life. And it's important to point out that the New York Building Foundation has contributed $125,000 to the launch of this program. Again, it's the Peer Support Network on behalf of the New York City building trades. The website you want to go to is nycbuildingtrades.org, nycbuildingtrades.org. Gary LaBarbera, who is the head of the New York City and the State Federation, will be joining us as our featured guests on the show today. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has signed into law several new restrictions on public sector unions, the latest move in his ongoing battle with Florida's teachers' unions. Now, one provision dictates that unions can only be certified if 50% of eligible employees vote in the election, and mandates that if 60% of the bargaining unit opts not to pay dues, well, the union must petition the state for recertification. Other changes: reduced paid union leave and created a new pay incentive scheme that removes unions from the discussion by adding another hurdle to teachers' ability to collectively bargain pay and working conditions. Now, the signing took place on the Friday before Teacher Appreciation Week, which was also International Workers' Day, as Florida ranked last nationwide in teacher pay for the third year in a row. These measures were heavily criticized by the Florida Education Association. And though Governor DeSantis announced that the law would provide once and for all the decertification of partisan teacher unions, the changes will also impact Florida sanitation workers, physicians, and other non-teacher public employees. Moreover, the legislation created a legal distinction between public safety and non-public safety employees, exempting correction officers and first responders from the new requirements, which is all by design to divide up the unions. Now for some good news. Yale University has announced it would begin collective bargaining negotiations with its postdoctoral research fellows and associates just one day after the postdocs voted to join Unite Here Local 33. Now, the American Arbitration Association certified the election last Thursday with 96.5% of ballots cast in favor of joining the union. Now, Local 33, which also represents the university's roughly 4,000 grad student workers, will add nearly 1,400 postdocs to its ranks, making Unite Here the representative for over 10,000 employees at Yale. Now, by the way, Yale unions were already a historically powerful force in New Haven politics, and that's largely due to the clerical and service workers that were unionized with Locals 34 and 35. Provost Scott Strobel and Vice Provost for Postdoctoral Affairs Lynn Cooley said, and this is a quote, "Yale aims to reach an initial postdoc contract in under a year, building on the strong relationship already in place between the university and Local 33. So hats off to Local 33 of Unite Here. Great accomplishment there at Yale. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Gary LaBarbera of the New York City Building Trades launching their peer support network. That story right after this on America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LaUna to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LaUna, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LaUna members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LaUna at LaUna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to New York City. And I tell you, I remember talking to this guy. He's full of energy, a lot of great ideas, and a very sensitive subject, I might add. We talk so much about mental health and support for those contemplating taking the end of their life. It's so important that they get the help. And there's plenty of help out there. A lot of people just aren't connecting with it. Our featured guest today is Gary LaBarbera. Gary has quite a distinguished history here. He served since 2009 as president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York. We're talking about an organization comprised of 15 national and international unions, 100,000 working men and women in New York City. If you go back to 2021, Gary was elected president of the New York State Building and Construction Trades Council, and we're talking 15 local building trades councils, 12 district councils, state associations, 135 local unions. Gary, I don't know how you have time to breathe with everything that you're doing. So first and foremost, welcome back to America's Workforce. How are you and how are the trades in New York doing? Talk to me about that.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me as always. Great to be back. Well, look, I'm doing great. I appreciate you asking, and the trade's doing very, very well. We're in a very robust period, and over the next couple of years, more than a couple, we're going to be very, very busy here in New York City and throughout the state of New York. We're very excited about the work opportunities that are coming. Obviously, this will provide us the opportunity to bring more non-union individuals into the trades through our apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. It's going to be a real growth period for the building trades, and we're very excited about that. We're also very excited about the projects that we're going to be building, some real historic, important projects here in the city, certainly throughout the state of New York. Syracuse, Micron, it's a tremendous chip factory up there. We're doing data centers in Poughkeepsie, just throughout the whole state. Up north, we're excited about potential in nuclear coming in and various other renewable energy forms. So we got our fingers in everything. Things are going very well, and we're going to continue the momentum here and look forward to the next several years for sure.
The last time you and I talked, you had a different mayor, and I get all the impression that your new mayor is kind of worker-friendly, union-friendly. I'd like to get your perspective on that because I'm hearing a lot of good things on this end, but you know it better than I. Go ahead.
No, I would say that Mayor Mamdani is very, very much aligned with the vision of the labor movement. One of the things that he's been very open about is to really build a stronger union density in the city. And I will tell you that he's very pro-worker, very, very pro-union. He understands the value of being in a union, that it's really the true pathway into the middle class. And we're working with him and his administration on a number of issues. He's got some great people that he brought in. I mean, Julie Su, who was one of them, former Secretary of Labor. Julie was under the Biden administration. She did a great job there. And then obviously she was drafted to come into this administration last year. She's responsible for economic development here in the city, as well as worker justice and protection. So she's a tremendous ally. When you have allies like that share the same vision as we do, it makes things a lot easier than having to try to argue or convince people in leadership roles here in the city that union work is the right way to go. And certainly construction is the right way to build. And so we're working closely with Julie and other deputy mayors as well around housing, around all these issues. So far, I will tell you that I had the right message as far as we're concerned about the increase in the density of the unions here in the city, as well as lifting workers up into the middle class.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you were involved recently at the legislative conference of NAB2.
Yes.
Yeah, North American Building Trades. We had Sean McGarvey on the show the day that started, and I'll tell you, that got picked up by a lot of unions. And I'd like to get your perspective on what he said, especially, and you touched on, with all these data centers and AI and all that. I'd like to get your perspective on that, if you will.
First, let me say that Sean's doing a great job at NAP2. He's a very, very close personal friend of mine. We've developed that relationship over 20 years. He's doing an outstanding job at NAPTU as the president. He is a very hardworking individual. He's all over the country, doesn't slow down. And we actually have had a lot of conversations around data centers. We spoke about this at the lunch conference as well. And look, this is a real opportunity for the building trades. One of the things that I will tell you is my belief, and I share this with Sean, is if we are going to remain, whether it's a state or a country, globally competitive, this is an area in which we have to advance. Now, the reality obviously is that, as you see, not only here in New York, but across the country, there is a lot of people now that are opposing data centers and opposing chip plants and everything else. Much of the opposition is around environmental concerns, but I disagree with their opposition, obviously. We see this both in New York, and I know Sean sees it on a national level, that this is a tremendous opportunity for growth for the building trades and for permanent jobs as well. And we also feel, and have had many conversations with a lot of the data center, developers, et cetera, that they're going to need our help to push back against the opposition. So I think we're very well positioned in this area. And I think it's going to create a lot of pathways into the Northwest, the union jobs. These data centers or chip plants, these are massive mega projects, which will create, again, hundreds of thousands of jobs in the future. So another area that we're very excited about. We see tremendous opportunity. We feel very strongly, again, that this is a priority, must be a priority to remain globally competitive. We're going to be there to push for every data center across the U.S. to ensure that these projects will be built with union trades and that will lead to good careers on the permanent jobs as well.
Gary, that's exactly what we want. I got to take a quick break right now, if you don't mind. Gary LaBarbera is our featured guest today. He's head of the building trades in New York City as well as New York State. Coming up next, we're going to talk about their peer support network. That story right after this on America's Workforce. Don't go away.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LaUna to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LaUna, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LaUna members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LaUna at LaUna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
Hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland at 216-881-1802. Call Music Talent of Cleveland as your dependable source for professional musicians in Northeast Ohio. Union musicians add harmony to weddings, elegance to parties, and uplifting music for all events. Music Talent of Cleveland contracts solo and ensemble musicians as well as bands and orchestras for single engagements. So hire union musicians. Call Music Talent of Cleveland today. 216-881-1802.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Let's go back to our live line and rejoin our featured guest today. That would be Gary LaBarbera. Gary is head of the New York City building trades, also involved with the state as well. I neglected to mention the website you want to go to. It's nycbuildingtrades.org, nycbuildingtrades.org. Gary, I want to switch gears here a little bit because it's important that workers, if something is bothering them, this is a tough job. Let's be honest about it. A lot of workers get injured. Sometimes they get on some prescription drugs. They can't get their way off of those prescription drugs. You know, we've seen some serious casualties here over the years. We lost a lot of members. I remember having a conversation with Jimmy Williams. Jimmy, you know Jimmy.
Very well.
Yeah, head of the Painters and Allied Trades. He told me when he was in the apprenticeship program going back to the late 1990s, there were 25 people in that apprenticeship program when he went. Today, 6 of them are no longer with us. Yeah, 6 of them. That's a pretty large percentage. Now, I know the New York building trades, you're doing a lot, and I understand you just launched a peer support network. Let's start right there. What's that all about? How does that work?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because this is something that is really important to us here in New York City, and I know it's important to all the national unions as well, and international unions. So let me give you a little bit of context here. So we know, based on CDC data and OSHA data, that just to give the listeners and the viewers a sense of this, the gravity of the situation with suicide. In North America, 1,000 construction workers a year are killed through job-related fatalities, but 5,000 construction workers take their own lives. To me, this is an epidemic, and there are a lot of reasons why. One of the reasons is, you said, it's a tough job. It's a very dangerous industry. So the dangerous nature of work is a factor. There are many other factors, such as, the pressure on each individual worker to maintain the schedule of the project, constantly being pushed. We got to stay on track. We got to stay on budget. We got to stay on time. A lot of pressure. Again, physically laborious work, so it takes a physical toll as well. Those are a few factors. The reality is that you're right. When workers get injured, oftentimes, and again, this is the physical nature of the work, they'll see a doctor, the doctor will put them on a prescription to manage their pain. And unfortunately, we do have the situation where, individuals get addicted to these substances, which is a major factor in suicide. So we recognize that there is a really an epidemic going on. It's my view, all of the union leadership here in New York share this view, is that as unions and union leaders, we have a duty of care. And that duty of care goes beyond just the collective bargaining process, right? It goes beyond negotiating wages and benefits, retirement, security, safety. Many members really do turn to their unions for assistance in all areas of their life. So I believe that, there's a duty of care, and we have to address and we have to figure out a way that we can be supportive to individuals that are experiencing different levels of stress. So about almost a year and a half ago, maybe even a little longer, I convened here at the Building Trades in New York City all of the MAP directors, the Members Assistance Program. These directors, these individuals, all the certifications for substance abuse, mental health, etc. And I wanted to sit with them and begin to meet regularly to figure out a way how we could have a structure here in New York City. My idea is obviously to run the natural state of New York, but to create a peer support network. We had a number of meetings, and ultimately, to their credit, they realized that this is a very complicated issue. And they said to me, look, we think it would make a lot of sense to engage with higher education institution, a reputable higher education institution here in the state of New York, to help us create a curriculum and ultimately implement a program. So I'm a alumnus of Cornell University, School of Labor Relations. And so I have a lot of friends at Cornell. I reached out to Cornell and I floated the idea, and they were very interested in participating and assisting us. Now, there were two primary individuals. One is a gentleman by the name of Jeff Grabowski. He's actually, by trade, he was a local free electrician, and now he's an educator. We were so fortunate because the director of training, a woman by the name of Ariana Schindel, she is also a clinician, and her discipline is suicide prevention. It was almost as if God put us together, I have to say that, and she added so much insight to this process. So we engaged them, and I want to note that obviously Cornell, it costs money to engage people and put together programs. The totality of the contract was $150,000, and I have to note that the Building Congress Foundation, the Building Congress is an organization that's been around over 100 years. I serve as a co-chair. That is a Congress of the industry. It's everything. It's labor, it's developers, it's architects, it's engineers, it's contractors. They actually, through their charitable foundation, they underwrote the entire cost. So that was an amazing thing to me, that the industry stepped in and said, we will take the burden of that cost. We want to pay for this, but we believe as an industry, this is a priority. So I had to mention that because that was so gracious of them. So we began the process, hours and hours and hours of meetings with the committee and Cornell, and we developed what we are calling a peer support network here. One thing that was absolutely validated by Ariane as a clinician was the fact that peer support is the most effective way to address people in crisis. It's not just in this industry, it's across the board. Think about, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous. Really, what is that part of that? What is the fundamental character of that? It's really people that are struggling with addiction with their peers, people that are also in similar situations. Peer support is the most effective way. Now, what we want to do is, when Ariana asked me, how many peer supporters would you like in the industry? And I said, well, I'd like to start here in New York with 1% of the membership, which is 1,000. And that I think we're going to exceed ultimately, but that is our target. So what happened over several months, curriculum was developed. Let me get into the actual program itself. What we are offering now, and there's tremendous participation, is first a 2-hour suicide awareness training, which is open to any member of any union and apprentices. We're going to embed this into a lot of your kind of curriculum as well here in New York. And that program is called It's Not Weak to Speak. Very fundamental. Now, there's a quote that Ariana said, that she said to us in one meeting. It's part of our ethos, if you will, of this program. No one ever committed suicide because someone asked, are you okay? People commit suicide because no one asked if you're okay. So I think that's very fundamental. We want to change that dynamic. We want to raise awareness within the industry about the struggles of mental wellness. Secondly, we want to destigmatize the issue of people that are experiencing crisis. And because there is a stigma around that, right? And again, the peer-to-peer system is the most safe place for workers to communicate. But we put together that program first, and then a 7-hour training for someone that would be considered a peer as part of the peer network. Now, let me say that these are not clinicians. They're not taught in any clinical advice. Their primary role is to be able to, number one, identify someone in crisis and identify the different stages of crisis. There are 4 various stages of crisis. That's number one. Number two, their training prepares them on how to react to someone in crisis, right? Because that's very important, how to react to someone in crisis. But their primary role is to be able to immediately connect them to the appropriate, either their NAP director, who is certified around this area to assess them as well as to refer them to the appropriate help. That's number one. Number two, we will be having a full-time clinician that will be overseeing this program. I want to add that my intention is, which I think I'm going to be successful at the end of the New York State budget, is I've asked the state of New York to give us grant money every year out of the budget to keep this program running. But I got to say something else. I need about $200,000 for initial seed money before the budget's done, before we start getting funded. So we could hire the clinician. This money is going to go for education, et cetera, et cetera. I presented at a conference in March with the building trades. We had a lot of guest speakers, and PELMA, which is the Pharmaceutical Industry Labor Management Association. They represent pharmaceutical industry. They have a very strong relationship with NAPTU. In fact, Mark McManus, who's the general president of the UA, United Association's chairman. And this is built around all of the facilities that are built in the pharmaceutical industry, and it's being built union, and they have this very good relationship. So I gave this presentation, and one of the gentlemen that with PILMA now is an old colleague of mine from when I was with the Teamsters Union. He came up to me, he said, "Look, Gary, let me see if we can help raise money." Long story short, PILMA, which is the pharmaceutical industry, is going to subsidize the entirety of that $200,000. Again, industry is stepping in. They recognize there's a connection. So I have to mention these things. You got the industry, you have the pharmaceutical industry, all supporting this program. So there will be a full-time clinician that will be managing everything. And that's for liability purposes, that's for assessment purposes, and that's obviously, this is all going to be covered under HIPAA. This is all confidential. So we will deploy these peer supporters to the job sites. Now, what makes this so unique? And I was actually asked to present at a panel down at that legislative conference. What makes this program very unique is it is a vertically integrated program. So what do I mean by that? Now, I give enormous credit to all of the international unions, local unions that are within their own membership addressing the issue of suicide prevention. But what makes this program very unique is an integrated, vertically integrated program, which means if you are trained to be a peer assistant, it doesn't matter what trade you're in. So in other words, if you are a laborer or you are a carpenter or you are an electrician, a plumber, whatever trade you're in, you are being trained to deal with anyone on the job site, whether you are a carpenter, electrician, a plumber, or laborer. It is integrated. And what really demonstrates the level of solidarity here in this program is even the training programs that will ultimately be done to train the trainers will be the MAP directors, will be training directors. We will be having trainings at various different training centers here in New York City. To put this in real granular, for example, if we do one at the Plumbers Training Center, they have a magnificent training facility. It won't just be plumbers coming into that training center for this training. It will be every trade. Again, just building more and more and more solidarity. So that's what makes this very unique, in that when you are on the job and you obviously perform your work, but you will be identified, trained as a peer assistant. It's agnostic in terms of what trade you're in. If you had a laborer who was a peer assistant, that isn't just for the laborers on that project. It's for every member of the building trades that is on that project. So that's what makes this a little bit unique, is that it's vertically integrated, and it will also build more and more solidarity. So we have done our first pilot trainings. We're deploying our first cohort, which was 20, in the next week or two, to a number of job sites. And now what's happening, what we expect is the next 4 to 6 months is we're going to be running more and more training cohorts. Now, I have to tell you, there was no shortage of individuals who want to be a part of this. And the reason that is I would probably say, I have done this. If you're in a large group and you were to pose a question, how many people here know someone, whether it's your family or friends or friend of a friend, that you have heard of someone taking your life? 95% of the hands go up. This touches everyone in some way or another. And so I think that's part of the reason that, many people know, whether it's friends or family members who have, taken their own lives through suicide, they want to help. People that have struggled with substance abuse, also very interested in giving back, paying it forward. People who are in recovery. So there's going to be no shortage, and there is no shortage now, of very interested people that will volunteer for the training. Now, one of the last thing I have to talk about the industry is I was at an industry meeting with the Building Trades Employer Association. That's all of the union signatory associations. And I said, listen, the Building Congress Foundation underwrote the cost for putting training together. Hilva is paying for, the seed money. I have one ask of all the contractors, and that is, these trainings will be done probably in 2 separate training periods. I asked the industry that when those individuals who are going to volunteer and have been vetted through their training directors and the MAT directors and their business managers, the training will likely be during some work hours during the week. I would ask that, you as employers pay for that time for the training. And actually, I got a round of applause. So they said, absolutely. So I just want to say that, industry has really, really supported us in the building trades here. It cannot be done without the support and involvement of the employers and contractors in the industry, from CMs, the subcontractors, the second, third tier subcontractors who won't work without their support. Because again, when we have the toolbox meetings and we have safety meetings, mental wellness will be integrated into those meetings now. It just won't be about make sure you wear your harness and your PPE and we're doing this today and doing that tomorrow. This will be a component on the site all the time. And there will be signage all over the sites about the peer support network. And the peer supporters will be identified with very large helmets, hard hat stickers, and maybe other insignia on their PPE. So everyone will know who a trained, certified peer supporter will be. And the certifications will come from Cornell University as well as from the Building Trades Council. And it was important that the industry embraced this, and they had, I have to say that. With this funding, we are going to build an app. So this will all be can be done in seconds when we need to connect people, and we will keep documentation. We will be able to monitor how well the program is working. There's a lot to build out, and that's why we thought it was important to have Cornell assist us. So we're very excited about maybe being able to really have a program that will really make a difference and save lives. So that's pretty much the construct here. Again, what makes it somewhat unique is that it is vertically integrated. It's your peer assistant. When you're a peer assistant, you're agnostic of trade. If you're a carpenter, you will be assisting anyone from any other trade. And I think that speaks very loudly to the solidarity here in New York of the trades, but also to the commitment that everyone involved in this program, from the MAP directors with Cornell to the business managers to the peer supporters, really and truly feel that duty of care, really and truly want to make a difference, and really and truly want to be able to prevent people who are really at a point of hopelessness, to be there for them, to give them support, and to guide them to the right help and assistance. That's the construct we're pleased that we're really actually beginning to implement. Again, we're going to just keep building the program, both through education and training and implementation. And I truly believe that this is going to make a big difference. The last piece I have, and then you can ask me any questions, obviously, is the idea, and I've discussed this with the State Building Trades Executive Board, as we mentioned, the president of State Trades as well. The idea will be to have New York City as a pilot program. And then once we have this fine-tuned, this will be offered to all the other councils to implement the training of the program. And I will say also, when I referring back to the contractors, many of the contractors have asked, look, I would like to have all my supers trained in this as well. We're going to do that for them as well. We're going to train everybody that wants to be trained, that's suitable to be trained both in labor and management. And I think it's going to change the culture around the stigma of mental wellness. Been around a long time. Think about how cultures have changed over time in the industry around physical safety, wearing harnesses. I mean, if you look at some of the pictures from the 60s and 70s, even the early 80s, nobody's wearing nobody's wearing harnesses. You don't see anybody on the job day without, wearing a harness, being tied off, wearing a hard hat, wearing glasses, gloves, PPE. This was all part of a culture change. And so we want to make mental wellness, we want to have a culture change there that, hey, it's not weak to speak. And it's okay if you're struggling. And if you are struggling, we are here for you. We're here to help you, assist you, and get you through your difficult time. So that's what we're doing. And again, we feel it's really important to do. And we're going to continue to grow the program. And again, I believe we're going to be able to intervene, and we're going to make a difference in many lives.
And that's what we all want. We want to make a difference. We want to make a positive difference. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of moving parts, and I appreciate it. I mean, you put your heart and soul into this program, and I could see why. It takes a leader. It takes a leader to do something like this. And obviously, you got a heck of a background here to make this happen. So with that being said, I want to stay on this. You said this is a pilot program, okay? And obviously, I see good things happening here. It's got to happen. It really does. But let's regroup here, if you don't mind, 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now and see.
Yes, I'd love to do that. I would love to do that. Because of the way it's being structured with the apps, I think we'll have that. We'll be able to, data mine. And I would love to regroup in about 6 months. I think that's about the right time, and we'll be able to deploy, quite a few more on many more jobs. So that would make a lot of sense. And I'd love to come back and talk to you about the program. Because, even this conversation, again, I really deeply appreciate you having me on. Even this conversation just lifts up the issue around mental wellness. And it's so important that we talk about this. It's a hard subject to talk about. And let me just say one other thing, when I first began talking about this was a couple of years ago, when we really understood the level of the gravity of the amount of suicides in the industry. And here in New York State, at state conferences, if you get to talk about it, it's a thorny subject, right? Mental wellness and ultimately feelings, emotions, struggles. But I have to tell you, the room, large groups of people literally transformed. I mean, I have to say this, it was really an uplifting experience, literally transformed. It actually became almost like a safe space. Many of the people in the room, whether it's business managers or business agents or others, began to very much open up about their own personal experiences. I mean, we had one individual who got up, whose son was in the trade as well, and took his own life. And he was emotional, and the support around him in that meeting was incredible. I mean, when we began broaching this tough subject to talk about, the willingness and the openness of everyone involved in trades and leadership roles was the only thing I can say was overwhelming. That was clearly the indicator that we're going to be able to do something here, because again, everyone wants to make a difference. And, suicide has touched so many lives. Frankly, so many people within the trades have lost loved one, right? Without disclosing, I mean, we had an individual who's very involved in the program whose mom took her own life, when he was a young man. We can only imagine how dedicated and committed he is. We have one individual that's very involved in the program who he himself, we have a number of actual individuals that are in MAP directors that attempted suicide. One individual is probably the most outspoken, attempted suicide twice in his life, and substance abuse, which his recovery is what led him to go into this field. These are real stories. I mean, I'll share one story without identifying anyone, but we had someone that, again, very, very involved. He's been very open about this. He was on a building here in New York, a construction project, very big project. He was in despair. He was suffering from, addiction. His family was falling apart. And one day he was, up and, his harness on, and he walked to the edge of the building and he was going to jump. before he got to the edge of the building, he felt a hand grab his harness and physically pull him back and sat him down. And he said, "What are you doing? Are you okay?" And this individual looked up at him and said, "No, I'm not okay." So he goes, "All right, I'm going to tell you what. I'm making a call right now to our MAP director. You're not moving here. We're going to get you help." And he said to him, "When you get whatever help you need, we're going to get you. And if you got to go in for rehab," which he had to obviously go for rehab, he goes, "I'm going to be the first face you see the day you walk out of that rehab center." I have to mention, he was. His co-member, his brother, was there to drive that individual home. That in and of itself is an example of what a peer does. That's what a peer system is. He turned to his own brother in the building trades and he opened up. He said, "No, I'm not all right. I need help." And that's just a great example. And we just had an incident not long, a couple of weeks ago, similar situation where someone went to their foreman on the job and said, I'm not doing well. I don't know if I'll be back tomorrow." Phone calls were made immediately, got him the help he needed as well. That was a life saved. That's why I'm very confident in the program. And I'm telling you, it's going to make a difference here. Again, roll it out across the state. What makes it unique, again, and look, I'm not taking anything away. I give nothing but credit and applause and recognition to the international unions because they're all doing something. But what we felt would be really the most efficient is to have this vertically integrated system where, and it also builds, solidarity within the trades.
Yeah. Gary LaBarbera, our featured guest today, on behalf of the New York City and New York State building trades. I want to drive everybody to the city website. It's nycbuildingtrades.org. Let me repeat that, nycbuildingtrades.org. Gary talking about the recent launch of their peer support network. You can take a look at the suicide rate in the trades, 5-6 times higher than the general population. And something is being done about that. And Gary, I promise you, we're gonna link up with you again, get an update on that.
Happy to do that.
You take care, stay safe, and stay in touch, okay, brother?
Appreciate it very much.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow on the show, the Economic Policy Institute and labor lawyer Andrew Strom will be joining us. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.